On this damp, gray morning, let me wish you happy spring. With the changes of the seasons, I've been thinking about cycles recently. One of the readings I often use to start at memorials and funerals is from the book of Ecclesiastes, that one that goes unlisted so many times in our lives. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to reap, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. The author reminds us of the sorrows as well as the joys and the enormity of life, and the repetitive nature of the verse kind of belies the depth of the truth. You know, that no one state of being remains in place forever. And not only that, they're often so frequently kind of jumbled up on top of each other. That there is often more adventure than expected or desired, and it's often more complicated, much more complicated than either reaping and either sowing. Breaking down and building up are not discrete states, that mourning and dancing are often in the same motion. So as we enter into the spring, into this time of new possibilities, of graduations, of departures, I'd like to offer a little reflection on the nature of change and transformation. And it is because of changes that I'm with you this morning. It's my pleasure to be a guest. When the appeal went out to the area ministers after the Reverend Elevin's departure last fall, I was happy to say yes, to be able to step up this morning. And as this congregation goes forward and bringing an interim minister and enters into the search for a new permanent minister, I am actually also scheduled, this is kind of an unofficial first hello, but I'm scheduled to be your, what's called a ministerial search representative. It's a long name for someone who's supposed to help the search along the way. And I've also enjoyed the chance to serve with your departing Director of Religious Education, Andrea Petty, and the other religious educators in supporting education efforts in the entire Metroplex. So our worship together, my appearance with you, it is all an embodiment of a lot of change happening. Which kind of leads me to my first point, that before something new begins, something else ends. That endings are the beginnings of transitions. For some of us, there have been a number of literal deaths, which have forced an ending of a certain relationship or a path. And sometimes those endings, they are involuntary. And although those have been involuntary, there is also those that are more or less voluntary and have a lot of pain and disorientation along the way. William Bridges, who is the past president of the Association for Humanistic Psychology, talks about the difference between change and transformation. Change is a particular event, a particular circumstance, a moment where one thing was once one way and now it is something different. Whether or not somebody had any choice in the matter, or whether it was intentionally or unintentionally done. Change is simply change. It's simply a fact. Transformation, on the other hand, is the experience of responding to change. Transformation is the experience of responding to change. It is the moment when you encounter the new friend, the new member, the new greeter at the door, and you choose how you want to say hello, how you want to engage with each other. But of course, one can't get into these conversations without very much first acknowledging some of the emotions wound up in them, one of which being fear. And sometimes we're afraid to give up painful situations for fear of the unknown. I'm going to take a wild guess. Can anybody think of a friend or an associate they know who seems to enter into one massively dysfunctional relationship after another? Yes? See nods, yes. And can't seem to stop themselves. There just seems to be this strong pattern, and they just go from one to the next, even when the next looks promising. A friend of mine was, I was observing a friend of mine about this at one point, and certain patterns in this friend's life, and I said, "You know where this comes from, right?" "Yes." "You know where these tend to go?" "Yes." And they described the experience of having a bad case of the warm, prickly pear fuzzies. He says, once you hug enough cactuses, you start to miss the familiarity of the pain. You're afraid there won't be anything if you give up the pain. The emotional consequences of these kinds of endings in our lives can be profound. Even with what seems like minor changes or endings, even if they're generally positive, there is still a sense of sadness or loss. And at some level, there is some kind of pain associated. For at some level, we need to grieve the parts of our lives that are now past. We have the need to find a way to say, for good or for ill, this is now gone. One of my favorite definitions of forgiveness is letting go of a past that's never going to change. Letting go of a past that's never going to change. One of the things I love about our congregation is that this is the kind of place where we get to acknowledge those changes in our lives every week. Every week we hear heartbreak and hope. Every week somebody gets up and shares something that has transformed their lives. I love the news of Sean's new job, but that certainly came because something else ended. At certain times of the year, we bring up graduations and the starts of the school year. Congratulations to those who have gotten into their school of choice, or, well, perhaps more quiet condolences to those who didn't get where they wanted to go. All of these are usual cycles. And the rituals and rites and passages that we offer all help to give form to these changes and help us be aware of them and help us understand our own responses to them. But then there's those times of life when the church itself is in the process of transformation, in the moment of bloom. I was reminded of just sighting the bluebonnets for the first time of the spring last weekend on the way to church. And remembering that those are tough nuts to get to bloom. They are really tough. They can hang out for a long time and not do anything, and they have to be really agitated, scored, rubbed, and then watered before they bloom. There's a lot that goes into the process of transformation. I was reminded of the story of Moses and the Hebrews in the larger narrative of when a whole people left one state and entered into that time of wandering in the wilderness. In that kind of chaos, the people wandered far, lived their lives, tried to retain and grow the bonds of community. But they also made mistakes. They also complained mightily to Moses and to each other, and they grew angry at each other, and impatient and frustrated that nothing seemed settled. That's the absolute conversation. Nothing is settled, ever, again. And on some days, I bet you it felt like that. I bet there were even days when that permanent slavery in Egypt looked a lot better than another minute in the desert. It looked a lot better than another moment of insecurity, of not knowing where they were going and what was actually going to happen to them. So this chaos, this in-between place of being in this wilderness, of being in this journey, is what psychologist Erik Erikson calls the neutral zone. It's a state in which people often feel the truth of the bumper sticker, which reads, "My karma ran over my dogma." You can't rush this part of the process. It is an experience of listlessness, of sitting still, or simply allowing something to be for a while until whatever important inner processes take place. It's a time that's not an ending, and it's not a beginning. It's a moment when old patterns can have a chance to fall away, and we find ourselves trying on new ways of being in the world. And sometimes we can be a little outside of the reality of the world and more open to things we've never seen before. You can have vivid dreams, a sense of waiting. And in those moments, the first advice in those moments is always to be present, to whatever degree one can, and trust the process. Trust that there is, yes, a wilderness, but there's also a land at the end. And keep asking questions along the way. The Catholic mystic Meister Eckhart called this kind of time of chaos the via negativa, offering that often the only way out of this purgatory or hell, wherever you want to define it, is to in fact go through it. That is this nether world, this land of fairy, which the mythic hero enters and leaves, transformed by their encounters. And this is the matter of transformation, which is crucial to understanding the chaos. Anthropologist Mircea Eliade wrote that for the archaic and traditional cultures, the symbolic return to chaos is indispensable in any new creation. So Moses and the people returned to the state of chaos. It was absolutely essential to them becoming an integrated whole. In the midst of the chaos, some people might experience a sense of they're seeing things that they really are for the first time. That the veil of old perceptions is lifted from the eyes. This neutral zone provides access to an angle of vision that is, there is no other moment to get it. It is unique. You can get it nowhere else. It's the succession of such experiences and those unique views that can feed a sense of wisdom and growth and development. This chaos is an opportunity for renewal and recreation. Just in every moment, as you have in your canvas in your upcoming budget drawing, in every moment in the new spring of the church year as you look forward to the next, but perhaps in this moment more than most, there is an opportunity to say, how do you really want to be? What is most important? What is unique? What is the specific voice that this particular community provides in this place, in this time? And what would you like to do with that to make it happen? William Bridges feels that these transitions are part of our natural process of renewal. That in understanding these, the elements of transitions in our lives, we won't just be able to cope with them. We won't just be able to say, phew, we got through it and we can move on. We will be better able to work with them. We'll have a greater ability to impact the changes and kind of maybe shape that path. I love the example of the children sharing the new box of crayons. You won't just accept the next crayon that's handed to you. You take which crayon you'd like to pick and try to engage with that color in particular. Why not? William Bridges holds out for us that there's usually a new beginning after these endings and edges and chaos. And the chaos itself being a place of disintegration. By being more aware of that pattern by itself and that power, we have the possibility to greater control, or at least better understand what the reintegration will be taking place. And this actually holds out a great hope for us as individuals, as you all as a congregation, our association in Unitarian Universalism, as a society at large. Because with deaths and endings come the possibilities of new recreation. author Rain Eisler has observed the shift from one paradigm or worldview to another. That the death throes could also be the birth pangs and opening the door to a new future. That the death throes can be the birth pangs of opening a door to a new future. So in this moment, there are times when there are more particular needs, when larger effort is desired at particular times, and that's all right. As the program year ends, there are some program changes in classes. We'll continue at our plan for the next period. I just saw that Andrea Petty has the new summer curriculum for the children out already. But it's also all right to be concerned and to be afraid, to have fear and anxiety remind us to be present and take things seriously. Of not knowing where it's going to end up means you're paying attention. Alan Cohen points out that scared and sacred are spelled with the same letters. I know it just happens to be the case, but it's kind of. That awful proceeds from the same root as awesome. That is terrified and terrific. And that every negative experience holds the seed of transformation. Each of you is in a different place with responding to your own lives, to the lives of people around you, to the lives of this congregation. And it's just so essential to remain in the conversation. I often am doing transformative, transitional ministries. And every time I'm in those moments more intentionally, I always am grateful for that opportunity. I'm always grateful for that opportunity because I get to see how people recommit and find their own inner strength and find their own inspiration. And then how does that get shared out broadly beyond one person to the next and the next and the next. To see change being embodied and lived out with all of its grief and all of its goodness. It is to be fully human. It is to be fully human. We have to respect and embrace change with all of its risks for doing harms, with all of its power and potential for creating a beloved community. So there's an opportunity in the time of chaos, the neutral zone. It's dangerous and it's possibility. You have a chance to do something a little different than what had been done before. You don't need to be attached to everything that they did. You should also get to love and embrace what is figured out to be the most important. And then over time, there's no one discrete moment, but over time, the body of the people of Israel, or the Hebrews, I should say, figured out they went from being this one people who were newly freed after being so enslaved. That they wandered in this time in the desert and were able to become something entirely new and to reach out and find that promised land. They took a lot of control of their path along the way. English novelist John Ellsworth notes that the beginning of all human undertakings are untidy. Beginnings do not have clear and solid points of origin. We may not see them until they are well underway and we are already celebrating. Beginnings are a process of reintegration, and not everything disappears. A lot of things fall away, a lot of new behaviors come into being. So I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you in all aspects of life to remember that endings and beginnings are there and all the stirring germination in between. That these patterns are basic to our individual lives and as communities and as as we recognize it and work with it, we have the possibility for new growth and deepening and becoming who we want to be, both in our personal lives, in our congregations, in our faith, and in our world, to aspiring to what Abraham Lincoln calls the better angels of our nation. And all the while, this being and becoming, this ever-living and ever-changing becomes the embodiment of the beloved unity. What we all can be, and what we all are, all at once. So may it be. I invite you to join me for the closing hymn, Please Rise in Body or in Spirit, for the insert, Building a New Way, number 1017.